Sunken U-boat at the bottom of the Mediterranean reveals a chilling World War II tale. For decades, the fate of the U-455 was thought to be lost to time. The German submarine was an intimidating vessel known for impressive weaponry, and that's exactly why its sudden disappearance is so intriguing. How could such a massive submarine simply vanish into thin air? Had it succumbed to an enemy attack, or was something even more tragic at play? It took more than 50 years for experts to finally find their answers. Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. History can be found everywhere within the waters near Portofino, Italy. The location is a favorite among divers who love exploring the shipwrecks along the reef floor. The famous statue Christ of the Abyss welcomes divers to the graveyard, but you have to look harder for the treasure buried deeper in the murky waters. Of the many shipwrecks in the Mediterranean Sea, the German submarine was a surprising discovery. It wasn't available to novice divers. Instead, it was located at the perilous depth of 300 feet below the surface. When divers reached it, they saw a unique and morbid visual. The submarine had sunk in a unique position. Divers might have reached the tip-top end of the vessel within 300 feet, but the ocean floor was another 100 feet down. The submarine had stuck itself into the sediment at a position that left it pointing up at a 45-degree angle, almost like a fractured bone. A few divers have successfully reached the U-455 wreck, but it's certainly not advisable to newbies. That's because the intense depth makes for a cold, dark journey, especially in bad weather. But for those who know a thing or two about shipwrecks, just being able to see this particular U-boat in person is well worth the risk. You see, back in its prime, the U-455 was massive in all sense of the word. On board, there were diesel engines that could generate 3,000 horsepower. Electric motors gave the vessel its boost during its underwater travels, and of course it was fully equipped with tremendous firepower. 5 torpedo tubes were just one method of attacking Allied vessels. The submarine also came equipped with a naval gun and an anti-aircraft gun, and a crew of between 40 to 50 highly trained individuals was needed to operate the firearms. Clearly, this was one tough sub, though its most effective military strategy wasn't a solo effort. At 200 feet long and 52 feet wide, the U-455 utilized a method of attack called wolf packs. Once an Allied vessel was spotted, nearby U-boats converged for a full onslaught. The strategy to remain in a pack is why what happened on April 2, 1944 is so baffling. Despite its ferociousness and its many wolf packs, this particular U-455 somehow disappeared. It was patrolling along the North African coast in early April 1944 when out of nowhere communication between it and its fellow subs suddenly fizzled out. On April 6, 1944, the submarine was officially declared missing. In the following days, those in search of the missing sub had zero clues as to where the sub had gone. All they knew was that it had been heading to Algeria when the radio signal was lost. They had no coordinates, no whispers of where the sub could be, nothing. The mystery remained for 60 years when the wreckage was first discovered off the Italian coast. It had not been any average diver who stumbled across it. It was Lorenzo del Venezzano, an expert in marine archaeology. In finding the submarine, Del Venezzano finally found answers about the U-455 that were thought to be lost. Del Venezzano first discovered the sea life had taken over the wreck. Fish swam freely alongside the anchor and other holes and nooks found in the submarine's body. Barnacles covered most of the steel. Though it had made a new home within the sea, the sub still looked intimidating. When Del Venezzano further inspected the wreckage, what he observed was chilling. Some parts of the sub, including the guns and the bridge, were still recognizable despite the decay. The odd angle of the sub, however, highlighted something that the divers knew wasn't a result of decay: a giant rip through the stern. With this in mind, the first theory of what happened to the U-455 was that it had been struck down by an enemy attack. After all, just because a vessel is equipped to withstand warfare doesn't mean it will automatically win, and it's possible that the vessel simply lost its fight. The warfare theory didn't last long, however. It was simply enough to check historical records to see if a battle had occurred, and it didn't take long for researchers to learn that there had never been an enemy fire at that location. Even in the 40s, they knew combat probably wasn't what sunk the U-455 for good. Researchers weren't about to give up, though. Whether the sub went down valiantly while dodging enemy fire, or if it had been devoured by the Kraken, unlikely. The 51 men on board had families who deserved answers, no matter how much time had passed. Still, the only other theory was hard to believe. The U-455 was meant to withstand a full enemy onslaught. The idea of a mere accident befalling the ship was laughable, but with no other leads, an accident was the only theory that actually made sense. In 1944, proving that an accident had occurred was nearly impossible. By 2005, though, things were different. Thanks to 60 more years of navigational knowledge, the experts reviewing the wreck came to an unsettling realization. The U-455 had been traveling through a minefield called Fussball Club when it disappeared. Since the men on board the sub hadn't been given updated maps, they struck a minefield laid out by their own German forces. Suddenly, the unnatural-looking rip in the stern made sense. It's likely that the sub had simply been in the process of turning when it hit a mine, which broke 33 feet of metal off the stern and sent all 51 men on board to their demise. With this newfound knowledge, archaeological divers were eager to inspect the wreck further. But because the wreck is technically a resting place, rules have been set as to how people can explore the wreckage. The need for stricter rules arose in countries like Indonesia when human remains were being disposed of without care for the lives lost in the wreck. With this in mind, rules were created for the U-455 too. For divers interested in visiting the slanted U-455, all they can do is observe from afar. But since more and more people are choosing to visit famous shipwrecks and submersibles, it's getting difficult to keep people away. People have a morbid curiosity about wrecks, and they can't help but ask the same question, can we go there? In the case of the Titanic, for instance, the ship's passengers were once mourned, now their remains are plundered for artifacts. Rich tourists go to snap photos in front of the withering wreckage. It's a landmark akin to the Eiffel Tower, all because of what happened in 1985. For decades after the Titanic sank, people had yearned to visit the wreckage themselves and possibly even bring it back to the surface. There was a rumor that the ship's safes were filled with diamonds, which sparked even more Titanic fever and more failed expeditions.